probably inevitable that he will be the greatest professional male cyclist of all time. Welcome back to the Unchained Binge podcast, everybody. I'm Caley Fretz. This is the final episode. I'm talking episode 8. It is called Take a Bow. I think we'll be taking a bow at the end after making 8 of these in the last week. Joining me for the final ep, Kit Nicholson. Welcome.
Hello.
And Jonny Long, the
Hello.
lifetime member.
It says it on my hoodie, so it must be true.
It looks like it says life and meme burr.
Oh, yes, it does.
With the,
So this,
anyway.
the final episode of the final series of Unchained. This is the last time we're ever going to get to watch an Unchained
True.
episode. I suppose.
Probably.
And it covers the final few days of the Tour de France. So it's the GC culmination, basically. It returns to the GC battle. We've got Pogačar versus Vingegaard. It is hyped. And then Pogačar wins.
Yeah, I'll be honest. When I coming into preparing for this, I was not excited. Knowing what happened, and obviously they've done a pretty good job most of the time editing the episodes. I didn't have the pleasure of joining you on episode 7, but I thought that was the worst by a long way for overhype and overblown drama. But yeah, this one, I was not looking forward to this.
But
because
then
we'll
you
get
think,
to-
so dominant. It was so dominant.
We'll get
But then-
to
yeah.
we'll get to our broader thoughts on the
Yeah.
series at the end, I think. But yeah, I mean, one thing I did kind of appreciate is it was more, other than our sort of forays into France, it was more chronological.
Yeah.
This whole series.
Well, that's
right?
the thing with this last episode. They were helped by the design of the course and partly by not going to Paris, in that there was nothing for anyone except breakaways and Pogačar in the last few days. No sprint, nothing like that.
were you not convinced, though, Kit, 90 seconds into the episode, when you heard the dulcet tones of myself and Monsieur Caley Fretz from our regular Spin Cycle podcast, transplanted?
I was quite impressed by how awake you sounded, Jonny.
Me?
Given that
What,
we were talking about the last week, from the last week of the tour, there's still 3 days to go, and at that point, everyone was exhausted.
Yeah.
So they were listening to the Tour Dailies then.
Yeah.
Somebody was. Somebody at Netflix was listening to the Tour Dailies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was fun. I had to scrub back. I was like, I had to check. I was like, wait,
I recognise that voice.
That's us.
Yeah.
It was fun. It's a nice parting gift.
Good. Yeah.
Let's get to the episode itself. So like I said, this is a heavy focus on the GC battle, again, sort of roughly chronological, and I think that the context is important there. It was a 3-minute gap, 3:11, I think, into stage 17, and yes, that can sort of maybe seem insurmountable, but also the very previous year we had seen Tadej Pogačar absolutely fall apart in the last week of the Tour de France. And so they kind of open with this theme, which is that Pogačar's bad in the last week and Vingegaard is usually good in the last week.
But they didn't set up the context that the year before Pogačar had been injured and this year Vingegaard. They still gave us the crash again, but they didn't give us the context.
Details, Kit.
But that's where you get the difference between somebody who actually watched the tour and a layman. So I guess the layman would have found it much more exciting, which is the point.
This is what I mean. I like, that was clearly the intention, was to provide a bit of suspense as to whether he would do the same thing again, because I feel like we get a couple sort of face to camera kind of shots with Pogačar. We get a lot of them in this episode, and there's a couple where he sort of admits to being a little bit concerned, and we get shots of the directors being a little bit concerned. You just sort of explained a little bit, Kit, as to why maybe that concern was not totally valid. But it was there. I mean, thinking back to when we were covering this race,
there was a doubt.
Stage 16,
there was an optimistic
17,
doubt.
There was an optimistic doubt. So was that legit, or was this a fully overblown moment in the episode, do you think?
I think we all hoped that there might be a Jousson, but that the more likely to have a day off, a bad day even, was Vingegaard, given that this was his first race since crashing out of Zulia. He'd only had 6 weeks training, and yes, he is great in the mountains. And he actually, one thing that I did recall watching this is just how good he still was. He was absolutely flying compared to the rest. Evenepoel included, Carapaz. He was absolutely flying. So it was remarkable what he did. But he was, he was going to be carrying a great deal more fatigue, as we see, than would otherwise have been desirable had he not had that crash.
There were a couple of moments in this episode from Vingo where my heart broke a little bit.
Yeah.
Where on the radio
he was
when
an open book, yeah.
He was an open book. On the radio when he gets dropped by Pogacar and he says, "I'm really sorry, I don't feel so good." It's just he's apologising after, everything he's done.
Well, and he described it as one of his worst ever days on a bike.
I know, which just makes it all the more...
and you could believe that as well. I remember the day of.
No, but I do remember seeing those images of him breaking down in tears as he realised, there were still 2 days in the mountains left, but breaking down with his wife Trina there and just knowing that was it. He couldn't dig any deeper. He was very unlikely to take it to Pogacar. And I remember seeing that, but I don't think, they're quite cagey during the tour, aren't they, Visma?
Yeah,
and
you want to keep them guessing, don't you?
Yeah, we've certainly, we've talked earlier in this series about how we've seen behind the curtain on the massage table when he seemed to have doubts, and his frustration with the situation that he finds himself in is palpable. So we only caught glimpses in the live imagery last year. So I believe it was. Yeah, it was really interesting to see just how much more open and how much he was feeling and conveying to his inner circle.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then he has the quote, 20 years ago, no one dared to show emotions, but now it shows you're human, which I appreciate. But it also tells us that he understands that, these days, showing the real you and not trying to, paper over and be a persona is kind of the key. But then it also shows that Vingo, for the whole time, when, me and other people have accused him of maybe being slightly boring, it shows that that's just him and he doesn't really care, and he'll be emotional when he feels emotional, and the rest of the time he's like, I'm not here to be, your dancing monkey so you guys can write articles and, make good podcasts, and, he's all about turning up, doing the job.
Yeah.
Trying
getting
not
on
to
the phone to his family at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I mean, on the flip side, there was something that I was really, because previously he seemed quite nervous in front of the camera. Maybe nervous isn't quite the right word, but certainly slightly uncomfortable, slightly insecure maybe. But he went in those talking heads, the interviews to camera in the studio. He seemed really confident in what he was saying, including when he was talking about emotions, and then when they were giving kind of profile shots and all this sort of thing. So he has been coming into himself. But what was also even, we got even more of his family in this, and that quite touching moment when he was on the phone with his daughter and he was giggling with her and then realizing, oh, she's so far away, which she wasn't, because they were. I mean, obviously Trina was with him at that time, but his daughter was probably just in the hotel with a grandparent or something. But we've talked about this before, how he's always on the phone at the end of a stage on his bike, and they leaned into that, which I kind of appreciate actually. And it doesn't change, I don't know, necessarily make his character any different, but it's just like, no, this really is who I am. And I'm quite happy for you to believe that is, I am just a human at the end of the day.
And then once we're getting this amazing GC story, exploring all these characters, maybe more than we have so far in the series, don't worry, because then whiplash, we're back to Felix Gall with an update. Felix, how's the weather? 15 minutes down the mountain in the race that doesn't really matter, which was my knee-jerk reaction. But then I realised they're trying to set up the what's the word the French use when they're the coup d'état or whatever it is of the big boss.
Vincent Lavenu.
There, as if Felix Gall had only finished 8th at the Tour again, then Lavenu would have been saved. It's a shame. It's
it seemed a little bit shoehorned in, especially as we know that it didn't happen
a week after the tour.
Exactly.
It happened way afterward, and so that was somewhat disingenuous, I think. It's frankly like, but when we did the first episode, and I mentioned this like it's something that the viewers of the show wouldn't find out, because I assumed that it wouldn't make it into the
Yeah,
show
yeah.
because it happened far enough after the Tour de France.
But we know that they record interviews and,
Oh yeah.
French brothers strolling through the countryside after
Yeah,
the
they're
Tour.
like Lavalle's just up the road. He's not
Yeah,
got much on anymore.
Yeah,
So
he's
just pop in and see
strolling
if he'll
across
do
the
a quick
balcony.
interview
Yeah.
for you. With the AG2R bit as well, there were you get shown the meeting outside when they're like at the picnic bench outside their hotel or whatever, and there's just so many managers and staff members, and no one has any answer to any question.
No, it's like the earlier episode when they were trying to one-up each other on saying it's not good.
Yeah, and like maybe that's because if you start to try and provide answers and it's not the right answer, then Dominic will just you're gone as well.
Take you out round the back, yeah.
Yeah, but then they're all there with beers at the table, and so it's obviously a consolation beer, which is a top 5 worst beer of all time. But it's just like it does perfectly encapsulate. I felt the vibe of what they must have been going through, which was good.
Do you all feel that to the French audience of this, the EF episodes feel roughly the same as we feel about the AG2R episodes?
That's what I was thinking. Yeah,
like they just don't care.
Yeah, but then like maybe. Felix Gal, I like Felix Gal personally. I've like chatted him a couple of times. Seems all right as a guy.
Seems
but
like a decent, nice
even
guy,
Richard Carapaz, I do care a bit more about just because he has like won a Giro
panache and won,
and
won a stage.
And he's like he's a different sort of racer to Gal, right? Like he can go and attack like the best guys and win a stage or whatever. So there does feel like to be more at stake, where it's like, okay, like I can believe in the story and it might actually come true.
Maybe Dominique Sirius desperately wanted to be in the Netflix series as much as possible. He needed the team to
there
be
must have been some
splash
deal
because
done.
they've easily been featured most. I think.
Yeah.
Oh, by far,
surely
of all the French teams.
I had a question that I only half know the answer to, but maybe Kayla can give us a better answer. The leg boots that we see, whatever they're called, the things that we see Felix Gal putting on with the plastic covers, which I've never seen before. I've never seen the plastic covers as well. But could you just explain both the plastic cover bit and the more like the huge boots that we see him recovering with Felix Gal?
What's the plastic cover bit?
Because he puts see-through plastic. He puts his legs in plastic bags. I wondered if it was a hygiene thing where it was their shared boots.
Yeah, he seems to put his legs in plastic bags before he puts the big boots on.
Maybe. So the big
what are
boots,
they called again?
So there's different companies that make them. Yeah, they're like compression boots. Basically.
Being very BBC there.
Yeah, some of them get cold too. Some of them do various things, but mostly they compress. And what they do is there's like air sacs in them, and they start down by your feet. And they compress your feet, and then they sort of like it's like, imagine if
like a
someone's
blood pressure cuff.
Like squeezing all of the stuff in your legs up toward your torso, where in theory it will go through various organs and be sort of cleaned
ejected
out,
and
dissipate.
Yeah,
do you pee it out?
Yeah.
I mean,
in
theory.
Wait, do you actually or not?
If you have a really good massage, you will need a pee afterwards.
Really?
If it's a
I
sports
can't tell
massage.
if you lot are messing around with
No,
me.
I've had that experience, certainly.
Okay.
I was told, I went for a sports massage. It was an hour and a half. It was
Maybe
very good.
Maybe it's just because you hadn't had a pee in an hour and a half, no?
No. But she said to expect because of all the toxins that are... I was very dubious. I thought, okay, all right then. Airy fairy nonsense.
Felix.
But no,
it's a recovery thing.
Certainly...
Okay.
Yeah,
it was very
ice
sudden.
legs or whatever they call them. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of different names. Normatec is one of the big brands that makes them. I have worn them before.
Did you put your legs in plastic beforehand?
No, that's not. I don't know why.
Yeah, I think there must be shared boots then.
Yeah, but the inside of it is already kind of plastic.
Yeah, I've seen our colleague Ronan sharing them around with a bunch of people that he didn't even necessarily know that well, and they're not worried about. Maybe that's just Ronan's hygiene, which I wouldn't say is bad, but.
No, like they feel great when your legs are tired. I think that like a lot of this stuff. I mean, the massages too is sort of it's a bit of art as much as science. It's a bit of like psychology. It's witch doctor stuff. That the soigneurs, who are the individuals who are in charge of sort of taking care of the riders in this way. They're as much psychologist as they are sort of physical helper. And they often have those conversations, and Yeah.
Some people don't
An
like them.
ear
I
to
mean,
listen.
Thomas DeGent famously didn't have a massage and just ate a bag of M&Ms after a tour stage, right? Wasn't that the story? That was a story once.
That you're putting, you put sugar
that's too
back
Belgian.
in while the
It's too
glycogen
Belgian
window
for
is
me.
open. Genuinely eating a bit of candy after the
Oh,
stage
yeah, no, I
is
know,
gonna be better for your next day than having a massage.
Yeah.
But that's what the boots are. The boots are just like they're basically a massage boot. Like I said, they just sort of compress the heck out of your legs in a series. So
I certainly felt
imagine
very
if
sorry
your
for
leg-
Felix Skull.
if your leg was a tube of toothpaste, and inside it all the bad stuff that came from doing a heck of a lot of pedaling over the course of 6 or 7 hours, and in the leg things are just squeezing the toothpaste out.
The fluoride. I'm
Yeah.
joking.
There's plenty of time on boots.
Yeah, back to Vincent Avenue. He is maybe
Yeah.
the only one in not just this season but the whole series for whom saying if we don't win the tour, I'm out of a job has ever actually applied to,
It's true.
which
That's
is
true.
which is actually a great way to round off
Except-
the
yeah.
show. Like the rabbit is
Except-
pulled out of the hat at the last
Rod
minute.
Ellingworth, maybe.
I think unless
Yeah.
they'd won the damn Tour de France, he would have been out of a job anyway. Because
Yeah.
he clearly just like Sirius came in, was going to bring his own people.
Yeah.
Not super unique to do that. I
Yeah.
mean, so we're going to do awards at the end of the show. We don't have a biggest asshole award, but maybe we should add one because Dominic Sirius,
Le Grand.
Le Grand asshole.
Yeah.
The way that he is portrayed. I'm not going to say that he's like this in person. I mean, when Chris Marshall Bell was on that episode, he said that Dominic is pretty well
Respected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
respected within the sort of within the people that run teams within that community, right? So that's a very different thing than the riders underneath him. At least from what we've seen in this, god awful man manager and just not particularly nice human being. And again, that this sort of comes into this team that is described as a family half a dozen different times, and it's very jarring. It's very, very jarring.
Yeah.
And I came away not liking him at all, and I'm gonna have to kind of get over that because I'll probably have to talk to him at some point this
Yeah.
summer.
And then Lavenue makes the point where he's like, Pogacar was dominant. What could I have done? Like Pogacar won 6 stages, stages that in a different tour would have been given in quote marks to a breakaway rider. So really, Lavenue's hands were tied. Dominique was kind of handed the gift of Tadej Pogacar in this tour because it made the decision so much easier to do politically. So yeah.
I'm looking up how many teams won stages at last year's race. 1, 2, 3.
Don't forget Total Energies.
4, 5, 6.
And 3 of them were French.
7, 8.
No, well, actually, one of them was Dutch.
9.
Arkea and Total Energies were the only stage winners.
9, 10 teams. 10 teams won stages.
That's probably quite good
Maybe
for a
11.
tour.
Quite good.
Yeah.
Have we seen Mariginetti before? The reanimated skeleton.
Skeletal, the
very
site of the
briefly.
peloton.
He's popped into 2 episodes previously, but very,
Okay.
very, very briefly. Yeah.
He's maybe because the camera doesn't love him. I don't think, or maybe he was just incredibly boring. In
The
rest of his-
he's the last, but he's the last shot of the entire series,
This is true.
right? So interesting to me that they gave that to him, because the end of this. So we get through the sort of semi-faux suspense ahead of these last few mountain stages. Again, not only semi-faux, only a little bit faked. There was some genuine suspense there. We get through that. There was there's a stage where Pogacar takes a bunch of time. One of my favorite bits there is where there's sort of all this drama building around what's going to happen and who's going to attack and what's going on. And the shots that they're using is still Niels Pollitt on the front, which means that nothing mountain related has really happened yet because Niels
Or
Pollitt
it's
is
very, very, very early in the mountains.
Yeah.
He's an enormous man. He's
An enormous German man who's finished second at the Paris-Roubaix, I think, at some point.
not a climber. If
Nope.
Niels Pollitt is still on the front, the shit has not
There's
hit
a
the
long
fan
way to go.
yet. So that was a bit funny moment. So we get to this key moment. Pogacar goes. Vingegaard can't really follow. Venable tries to follow. No one can really follow, and that is the end of the Tour de France. And then the end of the show then is just sort of like a Pogacar highlight reel, and talking about the fact that he is the champ and is the greatest champ, and I think that's the Giannetti line, is that he's the greatest champion he's ever seen,
Yeah.
right? And that is a genuine discussion within professional cycling at this point in time, is whether Pogačar is the greatest of all time. The greatest of all time traditionally has been Eddie Merckx, a Belgian rider from the 70s and 80s, and Pogačar has sort of matched him in terms of what they've done.
The type of rider.
The type of rider
Classics
they
and
are,
general
the things that
classification.
they win. But Pogačar still has many, many, many
Yeah.
years left of his career, and I think it's probably inevitable that he will be the greatest
Yeah.
professional.
Well,
male
except
cyclist of all time.
Merckx has his latest line, because he's swung back and forth as to whether Pogačar has earned the right to be described as the next GOAT. But Merckx's latest line is that he wants Pogačar and Evenepoel actually to go for the hour record, which Merckx has got, and that's one thing that Pogačar has yet to try.
That would be good.
Yeah, it would be good. I don't know that he would beat. I don't know. Anyway, whatever. That's not for this.
Sorry, before we really get into like wrap up mode, there's one thing I forgot to say. When there's the whole Evenepoel trying to attack Vingegaard, and then we hear from Vingegaard that he wanted to kind of put Evenepoel in his place a bit to remind him. He's like, well, Leia, like I'm suffering, I'm losing time to Pogačar, but I'm still a hell of a lot better than you, and I'm not about to let you like kick me to the side of the road, because if Pogačar wasn't here, I'd have stomped all over the rest of you with having had a collapsed lung 3 months before, 4 months before this race. So I thought that was an edge to Vingegaard and a competitiveness we don't normally get to see that much, at least in how he approaches the rest of the competition. But I mean, we saw the bit with Carapaz, but with Pogačar there is sort of that respect there, because Vingegaard knows they keep taking swings at each other, and it's a more even battle, and that there's a puzzle to be figured out there. But it really goes to show the gulf, and you kind of can sense especially going on to this season with the Dauphiné, and maybe what we're going to see at the Tour again. There's just such a gulf between a maybe era-defining talent in Remco Evenepoel, and then up to Vingegaard and Pogačar, which I think is really easy to forget about, but it's worth remembering.
Yeah, no, it's massive. It's absolutely massive.
Yeah,
right? Like
it's the gap to like Froome and everyone else during Froome's pomp, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah. And Froome had a lot of teammates to help him out. He was less of that kind of rider. He was, anyway.
So, to sort of illustrate that point, how far back was 10th?
Oh, it was
at last year's Tour de France?
miles, wasn't it?
50 minutes, maybe?
No, not quite that much.
Not that much.
It gets to 50. It gets to 50 within the top 20. It gets actually
fine.
to an hour. It gets over an hour within the top 20.
What was it?
So 10th.
Who was 10th?
10th was Santiago Buitrago.
Okay.
In 29:03 back.
Okay, still quite a lot.
Quite a lot.
We've had tours recently that
And-
are minutes, just a few minutes.
And 4th to 10th is all within 10 minutes of each other. 19 minutes back to 20 minutes
That's
back.
crazy.
So it's this whole nother level, right? And frankly, I think that one of the things that the whole series kind of hammers home for me is how lucky we are. We have both of them at the same time.
Yeah.
If we had just one of them,
Oh my God.
I mean, remember the Giro d'Italia 2024 that Tadej Pogačar won. Could have won by half an hour. I think it won by close to 10 minutes.
Could have rode backwards and won it, probably.
Could have ran some of the climbs and still won it in his cycling shoes.
Unicycle, maybe?
Like that's where
I bet
that's
he's
where
good
the
on
sport
the
would be.
unicycle. Yeah.
That's where the sport would be.
Yeah.
That's
But what is also interesting
without
about
having
that, what is also interesting about that top 10 though, and this is maybe getting a little bit too deep, is that most of them are teammates of the top three.
Yep.
Only Buitrago, Derek G, and Carlos Rodriguez are not riding for one of the top three, and Joao Almeida 4th, Mikel Landa 5th, and Adam Yates 6th. They are all domestiques.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which just goes to show how strong those teams are, and those are the super teams.
And it takes us all the way back to the theme of the first episode and much of the series, which is the David versus Goliath thing. So that was going to be my next question: is do you think the series as a whole, does it actually end up making this case decently well?
Yeah.
The case that the sport is bifurcating into the haves and the have-nots, and the haves are these super teams, UAE and Visma, and maybe Red Bull, which they put in that group as well. And the have-nots are basically a bunch of French teams, EF, things like that. They make this case throughout the whole series, and they've been making it for 3 years now. do you feel like it is actually made at the end?
Well, you already have in that episode, you have Rolf Oldag reacting to one of Pogacar's late wins, saying another stage win for a small team with Enrico Gasparotto next to him in the car, just looking so fed up.
And then giggling wearily. Yeah.
And so from Rolf Oldag's point of view, they're not viewing themselves like a money team with Red Bull as a sponsor and all this, and kind of an outside contender in Roglic, or at least the money to sign him, and they're there still seeing the distance between them and these top teams. So I think it has definitely highlighted it and shown that it's more than the French teams complaining and being like, we can't compete, because no one can compete with a lot of them. Like we remember as well that Visma had all their eggs in the Roglic basket, and then they kind of happily stumbled upon Vingo. So it's basically these super teams have the money to hire all these talents, and then it filters down, and basically the chances are you're going to land on the next guy. Yeah. Because some will work out, some won't. But by taking more shots than anyone else, you have more shots of hitting it.
Yeah. In isolation, this episode seems a bit odd to offset the Gal who went from 11th to 14th in that, and that's, I think he finished 13th in the end. But it seemed a bit odd to put that next to the podium fight, or lack thereof. Yeah. But actually, when you do look at it as a whole series and that David and Goliath thing, it does kind of wrap it up. Maybe not neatly, but it does wrap it up.
Well, I thought the ending was so weirdly abrupt. It was almost like they'd kind of found out that it wasn't getting renewed, and they're like, "Quick, let's just get this done and head to the bar with the AG2R boys, because the beers are on them, because they're all
Which is weird, because I felt like in the past couple of episodes, maybe it's a good thing I wasn't on episode 7 because I loathed it really, but I think it definitely seemed like it could have been covered in 6 episodes or less. And yet, we get to see Biniam Girmay, Mark Cavendish, who were beneath Pogacar, the biggest stories of the race. Biniam Girmay winning the green jersey was one of the best, probably the best story of the tour, because Pogacar had won the race in week 2. I mean, obviously that's with the benefit of hindsight, but by that final weekend, it was not interesting anymore. No. And Biniam Girmay gets barely a minute, and it was an enormous story. Yeah. And so it did feel a bit rushed.
Half an episode. But
but not but he hadn't confirmed the green jersey, I suppose. But we've talked in earlier series, like I think it was in the first series when there was a lot of interest in the polka dot jersey, especially through Denmark and Magnus Cort doing fun things with the and how they really don't seem to care about anything other than the yellow jersey. And
I think it just gets complicating.
It does get complicated, but
newbies.
The first Black African to win a green jersey, and quite dominantly. It just seemed like it was all quite breathless towards the end.
Well, and then we didn't even get the thing that we pointed out before, where it's just weird how they didn't include the Philipsen winning 2 stages, and then his tour was actually all right. Yeah. Like at all. So that's weird.
We've already kind of stepped into this, but part of the purpose of this last episode is to talk about the whole series and what we thought of it and whether we liked it and we didn't. I think we've tried, as we've gone through here, to keep our sort of personal opinions of like enjoyment of it to ourselves, because frankly that's not super relevant to folks out there listening, whether maybe you liked it more or less than we did. But now that we're at the end, and hopefully you've seen the whole series, we're not going to scare you away from watching later episodes or whatever. I think we can talk a little bit about our own personal opinions of how this was put together. To me, this was the weakest of the series, meaning like we've had a 3 series around 3 different Tours de France. The weakest of the 3 by far, right? By far the least interesting, by far the weirdest decisions around who they followed and what they did. Also kind of the least interesting Tour de France. So maybe definitely. Like from a GC perspective, so maybe that sort of hinders things somewhat. But it was a better series in Series 1 when there was no Pogacar in it, right? When they didn't have access to UAE.
Yeah, he was the elusive.
He was kind of the elusive Death Star guy over on the side, and I don't actually think the inclusion of those sort of talk to camera bits from Pogacar really improved the series much at all. If anything, it probably lost Pogacar some fans, I
Yeah.
would think, which I actually think is kind of unfair. He doesn't come across particularly well throughout. Vingegaard comes across really well throughout, but the thing to me is sort of like the overarching, I guess, commentary on it. It's just I just didn't understand the narratives that they chose to highlight. Some of them fine, some of them made no sense. It was so focused on these small French teams that, like, let's be blunt about it. Most of the cycling fandom world do not care that much about. And that's okay if, as you said, Johnny, like EF, okay, you're going for an actual jersey, you're doing something interesting, there's a bit of storyline there. AG2R did nothing.
Yeah.
They did
The focus on
nothing the entire
AG2R
race.
was bonkers. But then
it was so
brought,
strange.
But it was brought. I mean, I suppose it did add something to the story. It didn't need a whole episode to do so, but it added something to the story in its business versus romance sort of thing.
Yeah,
and
they didn't have the characters though. Like
No,
if it was Madio, if it's happening to
Yeah.
Madio, then it would have been
Yeah.
like, okay, great, because he's gonna get like Lavenue's just there, like
Yeah, he's a sad old man.
he's a sad old dog that already knows that it's time's
yeah,
up.
It's time's up. Yeah. I did feel like, I mean, my impression was that early on I was slightly surprised by some of the ways that the inclusions of, say, Archaea and Total Energies in particular, the latter being particular, the focus on them and the way that they were brought into the story, i.e. it was Pidcock versus Turgis. That was bonkers. I did like that episode and the inclusion of Total Energies to see that ridiculous Breton manor, and and actually to see the Turgis brothers, and that storyline was good. It was a well constructed episode, and the Archaea, the French episodes at the very start with Bardet and Vauquelin, I felt like that was good. I thought it had a strong start. The first few episodes, we had the French episode, the GC episode, the next French episode, and the gravel stage. I felt like it started really strong, and the Cav Goodbye episode 6 was great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I felt like it started to go down and sag and kind of run out of breath, run out of road, which I suppose it was doing. But yeah, I felt like,
which is what the tour did.
Well, exactly. But you don't.
Right?
But that's not. That doesn't really make compelling TV. But then I suppose what can you do?
But they can
That's what
invent
you've
it as
got.
well, so they don't have that excuse of like, oh, you know.
Yeah, they certainly
the
invented
tour.
other things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
pretend
Like-
to me that it came down to the wire. Come on.
So
Well, they did try. In
Yeah.
episode 7.
Yeah, they did a bit. True.
Well, and I think one of the problems with them trying to do the sort of like Vingegaard as a sympathetic character and Pogacar as less of one, as a more negative character. Part of the problem there is like one of the places they got drama before was in Visma. Remember with like
Wow,
with the
wanting
Wout van
stage
Aert
was- Yeah.
wanting to win stages, being a domestique, like that sort of push and pull between inside that team as to how they were going to operate, and that was all gone. It was just sort of like united front. Visma is all happy-go-lucky. We've talked about how Wout van Aert is portrayed and probably is like one of the greatest domestiques of all time.
Yeah.
Very, very
I
important.
think it's probably
to
more
everything.
accurately portrayed in this, even though he's barely portrayed, but more accurately portrayed in this than in that episode. Yeah.
So maybe it's just they can't win because we complained about the inaccuracies last time, and now we're complaining about the boredom, and we probably can't have both. To be honest, like if the end of the Tour de France is not particularly exciting, they either have to like invent something, or do what they did, which is just show how the race really petered out in the last couple days last year.
But then they could have gone back to the Intermarché bus. And that would have been, there would have been some great stuff. Obviously, it was a time trial to finish, so it's not interesting at all. And certainly not for the green jersey wearer. But they could have gone to the Intermarché party and heard about it being history making again. I don't know. I think I felt like maybe half of the team went home because they were booked to do the Olympics or something. But it's I don't know. I felt like episode 8 was a particular slog.
I think I still enjoyed it. I agree it was definitely the worst of the three. There's a certain lethargy that crept in. I don't like to admit this, but I definitely found myself in a few episodes moving my mouse to see how much time was left in the episode, and then being like, oh my God, I'm only halfway through and it's only a 40-minute episode. Which speaks
it's quite impressive actually to be able to make it.
Yeah, maybe it says more about me.
Slowly.
Maybe it says more about me than the show.
I felt the same thing.
Okay,
I did the same thing a couple of times. Yeah.
I feel like our constant whinging, which is I think, justified that it's the French production and it hasn't focused on international stuff. I think when we get to tour, we should ask some of our French colleagues how they felt about it.
Yeah, good idea.
Yeah.
But I don't think we would have got this. We wouldn't have got a Tour de France Netflix series if it hadn't been for Netflix France pushing it. So I think we've got to kind of be grateful that at least we had one and we tried it. It's just a shame that all the stars didn't align to give us a series that then could have got renewed for, again, after the initial 3.
Yeah.
They turned around and be like, okay, let's make this more international now, and then pushed on.
Which is crazy because it was one of the most successful French tours in recent memory.
Yeah, and like the tour has been better than it. Like it's so easy to forget how boring some of those 2010 tours were.
Yeah,
They were.
Yeah.
I will never forget.
So that's the problem. Yeah, so if they can't make it work, that yeah. But it's just a shame. I was speaking to someone at the weekend because we had a gap in between recording these episodes, and they only watched the Tour de France, and they also love the Netflix series, and they didn't know yet that the Netflix series wasn't getting renewed. And they were quite upset and confused about why it hadn't been. Maybe because they just presume that it goes on forever. Yeah. And their sense was that, that's what gets me excited for the tour. It like reminds me of what happened and just like puts you in the mood, which I think is something that will be lacking. And I just think it's one of those, I think it's just a thing we'll look back on being like, actually, it was kind of great that we had that for a while. And it will definitely be missed. And it's just a shame that it didn't quite take off how it could have. Because it could have been a real, like when it first got announced, we thought it was going to be a huge boon for the tour and for cycling. Because the potential was always there. I think the series could have been cleverer. I don't think they just tried to do such a colour by numbers, especially towards the end, of just like, this is what we're supposed to do. Just chuck it all in, get a few arty B-roll shots, and then we're sorted. When they actually could have, the potential is there to make something interesting because there's enough depth and complexity within the race and the sport. And that kind of just got chucked out the window for simplicity. When people don't, the audience is clever in that. Audiences are always cleverer than the people making stuff assume.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's sort of like ongoing discussion around a lot of the like what the broadcast looks like and how in depth they go and those things. I'm fully in favor of a viewing the viewing public as capable of figuring stuff out.
Yeah,
right? It's not that complicated a sport. It really isn't.
No.
Like at some point, it's the first rider across the finish line. They get a time, and you add those up, and that's how you win, right? Like it's not particularly complicated. Let's do some awards though. I'm gonna start with some basic ones. So basic.
Okay.
What was the best episode of the 8?
6.
So that was
History Makers.
Cav and Girmay.
Cav and Girmay.
Yep.
I liked the first episode. I think it had all the constituent
too,
parts of what the tour was all about, and it left me feeling the most excited for the upcoming tour, which I think is what the series should be about.
I quite liked the gravel stage episode, despite the nonsense about the Total Energies being favourites. I quite liked that episode. I thought it.
Yeah, but the actual episode was great, and the fact that it was Terjith that won is like that. There's nothing wrong with that, right? I'm with you there. Worst episode.
7. Easy.
I didn't like the last one.
No, I didn't like the last one either, but at least it was accurate, somewhat.
Yeah.
Episode 7 just made me cross. Just like,
actually, what was episode 5? Episode 5, that's the one in my notes where at the end I just have boring written in all caps.
It was 5.
Episode 5 was in between gravel and Cav and Binny. It was like a placeholder sort of.
And then
series would have been really good.
Out.
Series would have been really good if you just went episode 1, 4, 6. Maybe call it there.
Yeah.
All right, so the rest of our awards, these are awards that we've done season after season. And, highly prestigious. Obviously, we're going to get little trophies made for the relevant folks. Among the most prestigious awards in all of cycling, I would say.
I think it goes yellow jersey, our awards, green jersey.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah, in Netflix view, maybe.
Golden Raspberry Award, which is for worst acting, and this is one borrowed from an actual awards show. Nominations. Who was the worst? We had lots of sort of like in the kitchen moments. Those are always the source of the worst acting. What do we think here?
I'm going to throw you a curveball, and it's a very literal interpretation of the award. Archaea boss Emmanuel Hubert, because at no point did he actually act. He was either just
true.
I am gruff French team boss, I am emotional French team boss, who's won a tour stage. So there was no acting that happened. But I know it's not the word. It's not the who didn't act.
But he did lie.
It's the who's. And it's not like so what so but that's part of acting is lying, isn't it?
That's my entire point, Johnny.
Right, so he was the worst at lying.
Well, I don't know. I guess the whole when do you ever see a team boss do this? Or was that you fed that actually?
Yeah, he was fed that, so I can't blame him for that. And he was already trying to get the words out while his lungs were being crushed by a small jersey. The other obvious nomination has to be Remco Evenepoel and his wife Umi in the very sad kitchen.
In their bunker,
in Calpe.
Spain somewhere. Yep.
Because Remco, very eloquent man. I think they're both very nice and eloquent usually and whatever, and happy. That
felt like a producer
take
failure.
12 of
it felt like whoever was in the room with them. Like part of the skill set around doing something like that would be like to make them comfortable.
Absolutely.
Make it natural. And so it's not their fault. It's actually the producer's fault. Who was
not force them to eat like cold pancakes and berries.
If we're
doing across from each other.
If we're doing nominations though, and I feel bad for saying this, and partly because none of them are actors, but for the sake of argument, Matt Winston gathering his team around on the pavement in episode 1, saying, guys, you just got to race, or whatever he said. Basically the gist.
Yeah.
And you could tell he was just uncomfortable. And we've seen him struggle in front of the camera before, not because he struggles in front of the camera.
It's not nice when people ask you to do that if you don't want. That's not why you got into this. Yeah.
No,
I would have hated that if they asked me to do that.
Yeah, so you did, I also, as we said in our first episode, might have been done after the fact, which makes it even harder to make it up.
Yeah. I think the Golden Raspberry goes to Remco and Umi.
But
yes, not their fault,
I would agree.
But they unfortunately go home with that illustrious award. Melodrama award. So who created the most melodrama?
Do we have a Best Actor award or not?
Oh well,
I think we should just give it to Kit because recreation of Will Mark Cavendish win nearly a year after the fact was seamless, and if it's good enough for Netflix, good enough for me.
Did we only talk about that in After Dark?
Maybe.
There.
Wow, they'll never know now. They'll never know the full story.
Got to be a member.
No, it was funny. I just remember trying, because we did it before another podcast recording, didn't we? So I was looking at Johnny's face, and Johnny couldn't keep it straight.
It was very funny.
I did actually. Thank you very much. Well, I did actually write. I'll save it for another. We've got another award.
Okay. No. So sorry, the Melodrama award.
Melodrama award goes to Dominic Sirius.
Oh, right? Easy peasy.
Like just the creation of stress and drama where it did not previously exist. He was just he's an absolute champion at the. He was
basically Gru.
Yeah.
Trying to be the bad guy.
And specifically, the moment that I think we're going to apply this is the sort of the crisis meeting that they have, where they sit everyone down, and the riders are like, "What am I doing here?" And then the solution in the crisis meeting is that everyone's going to work together and also fucking sprint Sam. And that was the solution. Yeah. And I'm for one, I'm just shocked that didn't work. Really.
Same. Yeah. Big same.
Smooth Operator Award. So this is applied to somebody who it's usually like it's somebody who comes across really well. It's often like the face to camera kind of shots that we get with these folks. So I think the nominees would be like a Remco.
Yeah.
I don't think Pogacar it looks particularly smooth. In fact, like episode 8, where he can't stop swiveling in his swivel chair. Who gave ADHD Pogacar a swivel chair? Because he can't stop moving. he needs to chill out. So he's definitely not smooth operator. I think the nominee for me is Primož Roglic, who just comes across really, really well throughout. Right?
Yeah, he's pretty chilled, isn't he? Yeah. What about? I thought Johan Alfredo had a really good series. Yeah. Like he was very succinct in front of camera. Like had good lines, but also explained stuff in a way that wasn't just like beating your head with a stick of like the most obvious bits of bike racing. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think he uttered one like you can't win the Tour there, but you could lose it. Like he refused to do that. You know,
Orla did that one. Orla did the only way.
Job, yeah.
The only way that Remco and Roglic could beat
Yeah.
Pogacar and Vingegaard is if they finish in front of them.
Yeah.
Oh,
That was my
yeah.
favorite.
She was given the baseball bat of obvious cycling sayings and just
Yeah.
told like hit as many homers as you can, or just
Which
give it
you
to
feel
us.
kind of bad because
Yeah.
Orla's been covering the sport for a very long time. Like
Yes.
I mean, yeah, I've known Orla for at least a decade now, and
Just
we
doing
once
the job.
argued. We once argued all the way down Alpe d'Huez about whether Geraint Thomas was clean or not. By the way,
Wow.
gave her
Wow.
a ride down the mountain. Anyway, you feel kind of bad for her because like
Yes.
they're scripted. Someone told her to say that, and there's not a whole lot
Yeah.
you can do at that point. But anyway,
Yeah.
Smooth Operator Award, Primoz Roglic.
Congratulations, Primoz
Which-
Roglic.
If you had told me that 4
Yeah.
years ago, I would not have believed you because
That's
he
true.
was not a smooth operator a couple years ago,
No.
but comes across great now. Quote of the series. Favorite
There's
quote.
only-
We have some- there's
Oh, there's only
there's-
one in
there's-
mind for me. So if you've got any other ones, then I'd like to hear.
I
them.
enjoyed Rolf Aldag saying a win for Total Energies, which is kind of mean, it really, but it
Yeah, that
just,
was a
and
good
then in
quote,
the last
actually.
episode as well, another win for a small team.
Ralph Haldag's very
cracking.
funny.
He's
Rolf
sneaky
Aldag
funny. Yeah.
seems, yeah,
Sneaky
I mean,
funny.
and
Yeah.
I enjoyed his. He was quite smooth, actually. He was quite a good character.
Yeah, he
throughout
was
the
actually.
series,
That's
yeah.
true.
And the camera, they didn't need to come back to him, but they did.
Yeah.
And he was he was good value.
If anybody's going to make another interesting Tour de France series, it will probably be Red Bull. So maybe we'll
Yes,
get more
true.
Ralph Aldag.
Maybe.
That's true.
That would be great.
The only quote for me is Mark Madio. Maybe one of the first quotes we hear as we've said, the UAE bus drives away and they just pan to Madio. She's like, "Fuck, they're annoying."
Yes. Yeah.
It's just so good.
So
That
good.
I need to clip that up, and I'm just gonna watch that all the time. It's
Yeah.
just good. Just tweet it out after every single stage that Pogacar wins
Yes.
this year.
We need
just like
we need to screen grab.
do
We need to
need
screen
some- we
grab.
need a
where it
bunch of
pops-
screen grabs.
Does it pop up in the
Yeah.
closed captions? We need to
Yeah,
screen
yeah,
grab.
yeah.
It's a picture of the UAE bus, right?
Yeah.
And that's yeah. So
we
good.
It's
could
just
get a
so
bunch
good.
of screen grabs prepared.
the
Yeah.
best bits of this series. Like the thing is, yeah, there were some good moments, but they're just few and far between. But like when they get the moments, they absolutely hit.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the
But
best
also,
bits are when they say
Mark
what
Madio
they're
barely
not
had anything
supposed
else to
say.
do, did he?
No,
Except
he didn't.
say UAE is really annoying,
Do
and
you
our
think,
team can't compete anymore.
I'm taking something on a bit of a tangent here, but do you think that part of the problem is that the people in the show understood like what was happening more, like how the show was put together more than they did in the previous two seasons? Because
Probably, yeah.
season 1, you just got like cameras and mics like all over the place. You don't really know what's going to be captured. You don't really know when you're on film and when you're not.
Yeah.
By season 3, if you've been in this a couple times now, which
Yeah.
most of the people in this have been, you just know how the drill goes. Because I feel like
As
Yeah.
Chris
I feel like-
commented in the episode, was it episode 4 he joined us for, or episode 3? When
Yeah.
they every time Netflix is mentioned, they feel compelled to include it. Like Tom Pidcock saying Netflix
Yeah.
is here, so I've got to show off the cars.
Well, I'm thinking about Drive to Survive, which I watched the first I think 2 of those and I really enjoyed them, and then it was 3 or 4 where I was like, I'm out. Like it's
Yeah,
not good
it's
anymore.
too manicured.
Well, and part of the issue was that you could tell that the drivers just knew the drill at that point, and
Yeah.
so all those juicy little moments that you're talking about, Johnny, disappeared. And so maybe from that perspective, switching to a bunch of random French teams is actually not a bad idea because they didn't know what was going on. But the problem was that there was just no underlying drama.
Well, it's
things
probably
that
partly
make you
because they don't want to have to tell the same story over and over again for the next 5 years.
Yeah, true. Yeah, true.
yeah, they saw what happened with Pidcock and Steve Cummings.
Yep.
Oh, actually, would they've seen? Yeah, they would have seen that at the start of the tour, and they're all just like, "Shit, I can't say anything because then it's just gonna go on for 6 months, and that's my whole life
Right.
gone."
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah,
I
I think
understand
it could genuinely be part of the.
We're part of the
issue here.
problem.
We are part of the problem. So our last award,
The most prestigious.
the most prestigious award, which is so prestigious that Jonathan
got a
Vaughters
name
actually,
sponsor.
it's got its own name sponsor, and JV, when we handed this award to him at the Tour de France last year, burst into tears,
Yeah,
just crying.
and there weren't any cameras around, so you knew it was,
It was
for real.
genuine. Yeah.
You knew
Yeah.
it was for real.
I have a
So
couple of
this is-
nominations for this.
Wait,
Oh, do you?
say
Well,
the
I
award
haven't- so
first.
It is
Oh, you haven't said the award yet.
Jonathan Vaughters understanding the assignment award. And I think that you could probably all guess what this is.
Powered
This is
by Jonathan Waters.
Powered by Jonathan Waters. Avec Jonathan Waters.
Sorry, yeah.
And it is which character understood how to create the drama around whatever thing that they were talking about best. And it is named after Jonathan Waters because he is 2-time champion at this award.
Undefeated.
And undefeated. Do we have some nominations for the Jonathan Waters Understand the Assignment Award?
I have a couple of nominations. One of them probably isn't eligible because of the small amount of time that he spent on screen.
Okay.
But the small amount of time he did spend on screen was very useful, compelling part of the story. And that's Mika Landa for that scene at altitude over coffee when Evenepoel was getting all excited about the tour and Landa was saying, it's going to be hard. And then Evenepoel was like, yeah, but it's a tour. He's like, yeah, it's going to be, there are going to be more bad days than good. And that was good. That would be, that was another staged situation, right? Another, you could talk about the tour and your experience, you're not. So Landa, mate, we need you to tell Evenepoel, put him in his place a little bit, wind him in.
Get Mikael Landa around for pancakes and berries.
Yeah.
Breakfast.
Yeah. And then my second nomination is actually to Netflix for episode 7, or to the editors for episode 7. And because I had to go and I went and checked the. Yeah, I really hated this episode. I went and checked the results because I was sure that stage there was a huge breakaway and there was a long time between the finisher, Carapaz, the winner, and the GC riders getting over the line, despite the fact that in the episode they were saying Pogacar's going to catch him, all this sort of thing. It's like building up the suspense. It was 7.5 minutes, and that is not a closable. Well, on one mountain, that is not a closable margin, even with Pogacar in the picture. I just found that whole episode to be contrived and pushed it too far. And
I was annoyed that they didn't even mention the polka dots.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, they did in the episode title.
Yeah.
But otherwise, yeah.
But they didn't show it. Like, that was the whole point. Yeah, like,
exactly.
Yeah, you're going for stage win, but the whole point, like
that was a great
drama
subplot. That kept us going the past couple of stages.
He was in the breakaway for the whole, because Pogacar and Vingegaard were top 2. As you saw, Vingegaard was in the polka dots for Pogacar. Yeah, it was. It's a classic kind of Netflix. Maybe we haven't talked this series, I don't think, much about how it's part of the conceit of the whole production is that it's not made by cycling fans.
Yeah.
And so actually all of that sort of the prestige of the polka dots is maybe unknown. Obviously they will have found out what these things all mean, but actually the fact that he won polka dots and he said that he's targeting the polka dots this tour, it's a huge deal. When you know that you can't get GC, it's a huge
target
deal.
Yellow, yeah. But my nominations would be, I think Sam Bennett's wife was pretty good in her brief appearance. I thought she was actually quite natural and good at like directing the conversation while giving young children like open packets of like cereal or rice, whatever.
Yep. My doors. Yeah, it won't close right now.
Oh, I thought it was I thought it was one of you.
No.
Member walking in. Someone we haven't mentioned who I feel deserves more credit, and maybe this is the wrong award, maybe should have been mentioned the Smooth Operator, was Tom Steels, the Soudal Quickstep director, because he accurately portrayed what a lot of those bald Belgian dudes around bike races are like. They're kind of a bit happy-go-lucky, a bit cheeky, and they definitely provide a lot of a vibrancy to it.
Yeah, the Soudal Quickstep came across as a very fun team, actually.
Yeah, and I don't think
they're not, but I mean, certainly with Lefebvre around, they're slightly ominous.
The Wolfpack.
Oh, God, yeah.
At the Chuckle Factory. Yeah, no, they're all right. I've always liked Soudal Quickstep.
You know who we've hardly talked about?
Who's that?
Christian Nierman.
Yeah, but he's just he wins the Grisha Nierman award of just being Grisha Nierman.
Yeah. But like I feel like in previous seasons he was key. I mean, we had you're a fucking motorbike. Wow, like we had some great quotes from him.
Yeah,
right. And
he's been quite straight laced in this one, just looking after Vingegaard.
He just played the hit. He just kind of played the hits, or like the B-sides to the hits of just like, go on, Jonas, go on,
come on, eh?
We didn't get much Wout van Aert. We didn't get much. We didn't see his kitchen. If he's got an even bigger marble countertops, we might never know. Which
we didn't
is a
see much from
for
Phillips. Well, actually, that's a good. The greatest hits thing is quite a good point because, as we've mentioned already today, Philipsen's stage wins were not dealt with, but we did get to see him have a massive tantrum.
Yeah,
that was good.
That's true. We love a good tantrum.
Getting back to the Jonathan Vaughters, I need to call him Jonathan Vaughters. No, Jonathan Vaughters.
Well,
Understand the assignment.
Well, indeed.
Yeah, interesting to say
given
that.
the actual winner.
So some might think that this could be a historic three-peat for Jonathan Vaughters in the Jonathan Vaughters Understands the Assignment Award. But I would like to award it to Jonathan Vaughters en Español, Jonathan Vaughters in Spanish, to swipe it from Jonathan Vaughters in English at the last moment.
Yeah. Well, but perfectly so, right?
Just
Jonathan
like-
Vaughters in English also had a pretty good run. Certainly in that sponsor meeting.
But then he was just suddenly so loquacious with Richard Carapaz.
Yeah.
You know,
It was
just turned
the-
it on. No explanation of why they were going to start doing. I mean, it's because Richard Carapaz is really only speaks Ecuadorian, only speaks Spanish. But like, there was no sort of. It was just a real knee-jerk. Jonathan Vaughters seems in Spanish. Oh, here we go. This is
It
normal.
was actually impressive Spanish. Yeah.
It was
It was
Spanish.
great.
It sounded like good Spanish to me.
I
but
very
yeah,
much enjoyed it.
Yeah, he understands enough that he needs to then bring Richard Carapaz further into the series to get that episode made. So then he has to delve into his treasure trove of Spanish phrases.
Well, yeah, and he needs to just show the world that he speaks Spanish. Show off a little bit.
He understands understands the assignment across languages.
Yep.
And mediums.
So congratulations to Jonathan Vaughters. Jonathan
Jonathan
Vaughters.
We need to make it sound like Jonathan Narvaez, but Vaughters.
Well, in
I can't
fact,
quite get my mouth around
Richard
it.
Carapaz called him Jonathan Vauters, so why don't we give it to him?
Vauters.
Jonathan
I'm
Vauters
excited-
en Español.
If you want to hear us give Jonathan Vaughters, I can't do it. If you want to hear us give him the award at the Tour de France this summer, make sure you sign up, because that's definitely going to be an After Dark item.
Oh, yes.
And I'm sure he's going to be absolutely thrilled.
Burst into tears just like last year.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, I think that's it. That is it for
Feels
us.
like
Yeah.
Yeah. We are done with the Unchained series.
Maybe
small
forever.
It's over.
Cat just ran by outside.
That's the spirit of Netflix
There also
Unchained
seems to be some
leaving
sort
the
of Morse
earthly
code
realm.
happening behind you. There's a light flashing in the background outside your window.
It's Netflix. It's Dominic Sirio's.
Yeah.
It's like,
I don't know
stop
what's going
talking about me.
But yeah, this has been a treat to do
Enjoyable.
this with you both.
Yep.
It's a shame that this is not gonna probably exist again, at least for a while.
I
Who
wish
knows?
it was gonna be back.
Maybe Amazon will do it. Maybe
Yeah.
someone else will.
We'll
pop
do. I
up.
mean, we've tried to do it for other things, and that. Well, we did it for another Netflix product, but do you remember recording the Mark Cavendish documentary?
Oh, yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't.
and we had to. Well, it's okay because it's been erased from the history books.
No.
Yeah.
We might try and do some other things because it's good fun and
Yeah.
people seem to like it. I mean, let us know, I guess.
Anybody who listened to the Mark Cavendish episode will probably know why we ended up not
I
publishing
think
it.
I must have morally
Well, it was also
refused
just
to do
really
that.
annoying. The documentary was quite annoying.
Yeah.
It was very annoying. Yeah.
But anyway,
But on the whole, Unchained, net positive for pro cycling for sure.
Yeah.
Net positive for
Probably,
us. I mean, we know that we have Escape Collective members who found us through this exact podcast and through this
Welcome,
series. So
welcome.
for that, I think we say thank you. I do wish that it had ended on a bit brighter of a spark.
Yeah.
But what can you do? What can you do? Because
Bloody
frankly,
Pogacar.
the last 3 days of the last year's Tour de France were exactly. It was a authentic retelling of the last 3 days of the last year's Tour de
Did
France.
they even say in the episode that he won 3 stages in a row? Because we
No.
skipped a whole.
And they
Yeah.
completely skipped Victor Kampenart's winning right near the
Oh,
end there.
yeah.
Like they skipped a whole
Well,
bunch of good
yeah.
stuff at the
oh
end.
yeah, that was
But they like
good.
doing
I
that.
forgot about that.
Yeah, there was much
Yeah.
good stuff in there.
Oh well.
All right, that's it for us. Obviously, if you enjoyed hanging out with us for 8 episodes, make sure you head over and subscribe to Spin Cycle Podcast. Johnny and Kit and I are often joined by Dane and Ronan and other folks that are here at Escape Collective. Make sure you sign up and join Escape Collective because that's the only way you're going to get all the stuff that we make throughout the entirety of the Tour de France and Tour de France Femme. EscapeCollective.com/join. Sign up now.
Daily podcast from the ground at the Tour de France.
Daily
If you're
podcast
listening to
from
this,
the
it's-
ground.
we're
By the time
probably
you're
in
listening-
the midst of recording with Tom.
Well, yeah, actually, when these all drop, July 2nd, Johnny and I will be headed to Lille
Yeah.
for the start of the tour. Yeah, we love it. So thank you so much for listening. And I wish I could say we'll be back next year, but we won't be. Instead, we'll be back in like 48 hours on the Spin Cycle podcast channel. So go check us out there. We'll see you then. Bye bye.